Eat, sleep, bet, repeat. That's how we get down on the opening line at EliteSportsBetting.com. I got my man Moose here with me, our esports expert here today, and that's what we're going to be breaking down here today. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I watch my kid. He plays a little bit of League of Legends. I watch him play a little bit. I am not the biggest esports guy, which is why I said to you guys, I'm excited to have this guy on, because Moose is the big esports guy here. He does all our betting stuff at Elite Sports Betting. Also is going to be spearheading our DFS side of it, and everything else that we're doing here for our esports stuff. So, Moose, why don't you start off by kind of just giving everybody a little bit of your background and how you got into esports and, what you're doing with it over here for us at, the Elite Network.
All right. I'll give a little background thing. You're really good at this, by the way. I didn't expect all this energy to come in. So essentially, I started off with esports very early on, like everybody else, basically playing video games like every other kid in the world. I guess I'm just a typical millennial, probably a little bit older than the kids that play the games now. But the gist of it was that in 1999, I started playing Counter-Strike when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And Counter-Strike at the time was like literally pixelated, it was like pixelated shooters, like the old, it looked like the old Quake, that type of deal. And then from there, I just always loved Counter-Strike. No matter what I did, I just always followed it. And then when I was younger, I was playing on teams and trying to, go to local tournaments and stuff like that. And then from there, that grew into a position to help other better teams online. And so I grew into a role where I was an assistant coach at first for a team called Splice. And then I worked with them directly with their CSGO team. And I almost did like a sports psychologist type of thing with them, where I wasn't their direct coach in the game, but I was the guy that was always basically gassing them up before the game and making sure that they went over all their stuff and that they were hyped and excited, because all that training kind of wears on you. It doesn't seem like it because you're just in front of a computer, but if you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, it's almost like assembly line. It's just like, it's supposed to be fun, and then when it goes from not being fun to fun, it turns into kind of like a job per se, where like people don't have the same passion. They just get on, and that's when they start losing the skill and they're losing the passion. So I apologize, my cat's like looking up on me and stuff, just chilling here. This is the actual Moose, the avatar. So basically, from there, I just started lightly betting and handicapping esports once I got really into it. But it's always been like kind of a corrupt thing, because CSGO was always like the lower tier games were always basically thrown, and a lot of them were very, because these players aren't making very much, and so a lot of them are having a lot of issues in terms of paying. The teams are not being paid enough as much as the players are for throwing the games, and this happened very early on, very often. Like, it was very obvious that like a professional team would lose to a much worse team because there was something going on in the background, and It still happens to this day all the time, I guarantee it. And so as esports started to grow, things got a little bit more serious, and that's when I got a little bit more into the handicapping side of it and the DraftKings side of it. And then when DraftKings released the League of Legends stuff, I got really into that. And my League of Legends background is essentially I'm very familiar with the creators, because I went to high school with one of the developers and creators of League of Legends. The guy offered me a job instead of going to college to go work for Riot Games, and I turned him down to get an engineering degree. I could have been working for another cat. Could have been working for Riot Games right now, making millions of dollars, but instead I decided to get an engineering degrry and play it safe. Oh, so that's kind of my background.
That was the two guys from USC, right? They were business students at USC, if that's the story I remember.
Those two guys, yeah. Those those two guys are the main people, and then there was also the people that played the games, that developed the games, that went on to make Dota 2 and Dota. Okay. And so those guys, IceFrog and Pendragon, I was really good friends with both of them, and they offered me a job to go to Las Vegas right away. And then from there, they came back to work with Riot after Riot gave them all this money. Riot gave them a $3 million deal in 2008, and that was when they offered to bring me on as like a community manager and helping with the game and development, anything else I wanted to do. So, just when you think about it, hindsight's 2020, but that's kind of how I got involved with esports, and my two biggest esports, Counter-Strike and League of Legends, and that's kind of how I've been working on them.
Wow, that's an impressive story, and that's a little bit of your background here, so everybody kind of knows where you're coming from here. So let's talk a little bit about the betting side of this first, and then we'll get over to the fantasy side a little bit, because you've been doing You've been doing stuff over at Elite Sports Betting for us on the esports side for over a year at this point. And last year you were up over 100 units with, the bets that you were putting in and everything there.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about the betting side of things first. How do you go about handicapping this stuff? Where do you go to bet it is a question I've seen a lot of our subs asking you as well. So kind of give people a little bit of a background on how they can get into that if they wanted to.
Sure. So just to keep it super basic, I guess I'll cover like where you would bet it first. Obviously you want to see the lines first before we talk about them. Yep. But you have the main website that has been really good is Bovada, but sometimes their lines are not the best. And if you want better lines, you can often get them on MyBookie because MyBookie doesn't have the same type of betting volume sometimes on esports. Mm-hmm. And early on, when MyBookie first added esports, the lines were great. Like I was getting, plus 130 handicaps or plus 180 and stuff like that. Just like really good lines. And so MyBookie is a good website. And then there's a large website called Ultra, and Ultra is like odds makers, and they run a couple of different websites like BetOnline and sportsbetting.ag.
Okay. Yeah.
And so those are also really good places. And essentially those are kind of like the big four. And then a lot of other places are starting to add them. The best place that you could also get lines at, but for Bitcoin, would be nitrogensports.eu.
Okay, so there's quite a few places that we can go out here for our subs to go out. What games are you concentrating on within the bet pack that you're looking at? Is it League of Legends? Is it, Counter-Strike, like you were saying? Like, what is there a couple other ones that I'm missing here as well? Or which ones are you concentrating on for the plays that you're putting in there?
So the main places that I like to concentrate on are the games where I understand the meta game really well and where I understand how the game is going to go. And basically that's where I focus my time. And just to explain meta game a little bit is, unlike a typical sport, an esport changes over time. So the games get updated. There's patches, different characters in the games and different weapons in the games become stronger or weaker. And that changes the game. That's something that like a lot of people really don't understand in the grasp is like, why did this team win here, but then a year later against the same team in the same map, they lost here? Well, a lot of it is because the game changes. Like the game literally changes. It's not like think about how long it took them to move the field, the extra point line, right? Remember when the extra point line was in football was closer, was like 20 yards, and now it's like 33 yards or whatnot.
Yeah. So and you're seeing a lot more misses, which is a lot different from the points.
Right. Yeah. But that change took a long time to do. Well, in video games and esports, that change happens much quicker. That change can happen over a 2-month, 3-month period, and that changes the meta game. That changes the actual game that you're looking at on the screen. In League of Legends, that means you're playing different champions. You're playing different characters. That gives teams a better edge. What if this player has always played this champion? What if this player isn't that familiar with the champion? In Counter-Strike, that is also what creates different spreads between games, and oftentimes gives teams a better chance to come back into a game, or gives teams a better chance to blow another team out. And essentially, last year I had a really good grip on this Counter-Strike metagame before they updated their economy rules in the game. I had a very, very good grasp of what was going to happen with each team and how the game was going to go. So 90% of my bets last year were Counter-Strike. And then this year, Counter-Strike went into like a lull going into January, and I knew that I wanted to expand my repertoire per se, because I was playing Rainbow Six, so I wanted to get involved with Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. So I got involved with that. I got back into League of Legends heavily because I understand the metagame now better than I ever did, because right now there are specific champions that you pick and you just roll over on the other team. So live betting makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so here's the other question that I want to have. And for those of you out there who don't understand how big esports has become at this point, every year for League of Legends, they have the League of Legends World Championship. Last year, there was over 100 million. I didn't say that wrong. That's the exact number there. Over 100 million views of the World Championship for League of Legends. The championship game did over 11 million views, if I'm not mistaken, which is more than the Super Bowl does, to show you the scope of this thing. And it's a worldwide thing. You look at places in Asia, places in Europe, they have a league in Europe, they have a league in North America, they have a league over in Asia. There are quite a few different leagues that are going on here with, the top teams all coming together and playing in the World Championship at the end of the year here. So when you talk about like betting lines and things like that, some people are like, oh, how liquid is this kind of market? it may not be as liquid in the United States as you would think it eventually may be once this thing kind of grows. And it hasn't even reached that peak that it has in other countries in the United States yet. But when you look at it in total from around the world, I mean, 100 million views on the World Championship, that's a ridiculous number for anybody out there who's wondering how big this thing really is. Talk a little bit about that and how that kind of changed, pretty rapidly over the last couple of years.
So in the last 3 or 4 years, we had, I think there was the first League of Legends World Tournament that actually outviewed the NBA Finals, and that was where it really got big. But yeah, because it's a worldwide thing, it's a global thing, you have a lot more involvement with it. When people watch these matches, they watch them from everywhere. And so what League of Legends does is they do two big tournaments in the year. They have the Mid-Season Invitational, and they have the World Championship. And those tournaments are watched by everybody because they invite teams from every region.
Yep.
And the Sixth Invitational for Rainbow Six does the same thing. So you have essentially this like a global effort to watch the games. And obviously with League of Legends, that's taken off ridiculously, and it's leading the way. And in terms of the esports side of it, and it's just like the one thing I've noticed just from eyeballing is that the limits have gone up on games. The games are taken more seriously. There's real money involved. The most popular League of Legends player ever, legendary guy named Faker, the Korean. He just signed a deal for 3 years. I think he's being paid $3 million a year, and he gets part ownership in T1, the company that basically he's always played for, SKT T1, and essentially it's getting to the point where the players are starting to make serious money. Yeah. A lot of Counter-Strike players are making over 150K. Streaming is huge. A lot of esports players will stream and they'll make more money from that. And I'm really looking
Twitch, YouTube, you see a lot of that.
Not to mention the battle royale games like Fortnite. That 16-year-old kid in November won $3 million off of one tournament. It was a $3 million win for a 16-year-old kid, and he's a pro. He's never going to do anything else in his life. He's always playing Fortnite. Yep. So it's kind of like it's an amazing type of deal. And what's also interesting is that big game producers like Valve, they will personally invest into these tournaments, and they'll give these tournaments money. So Valve invests heavily into a tournament called the Invitational for Dota 2. And what they will do is they will promote it by adding skins to a game. They'll say, okay, if you buy these skins, we will take half of this money and put it into the pool for the Invitational. And then that results in like a $10 million prize pool.
Yeah,
That's an insane amount of money.
I started doing a little more research and digging into it a little more because I knew you were coming on and we were going to talk about it today. And some of the numbers being thrown around there are shocking. We talk about some other sports and stuff like that and how much guys make and things like that. This has actually also helped what I think in both the betting and the DFS side. Because like you mentioned, when the guys are making 10 grand or 5 grand and somebody offers you 20 to throw a match so they can bet on it, you're going to take it. When you're making $3 million, $4 million, somebody's not going to come along and offer you the kind of money you're really going to be like, yeah, I'm going to screw over that $4 million contract, to go out and do this. And there's also a lot of prestige and a lot of guys who are looking to get, be that next guy that gets that $1 million deal or $2 million deal a year or something like that. So there's a lot of guys who are taking it seriously and playing hard, which, everyone's going out there and trying to win. So it's amazing just the size and the scope of this all. So we talked a little bit about the betting side here, Moose. Let's talk a little bit about the DFS side because now over at Elite Fantasy, we're starting to offer, a little bit more League of Legends content right now for everything that's going on. And there are probably a lot of people out there who are like, I have no idea what these guys are talking about with League of Legends. So let's break this down a little bit for them, all right? So I am someone who's kind of a novice of it. So you hop in and you kind of build on, my definition of what I'm going to say. So for everybody out there, League of Legends, there's basically 5 guys on each team, correct?
Yep.
All right. And depending on how they do it at each of these tournaments, in a game of League of Legends, the characters that you use are called your champions. And there's usually I think there's actually a bigger pool now, but what is it, 20, 40 champions or something out there?
I think it's over 100 at this point. There's a lot of champions.
Okay, so they put them all in a pool basically, and depending on what the rules of the tournament are, sometimes you eliminate some, and then the other team has to pick from who's left.
Yeah, there's a pick ban phase, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's like a draft. The rules are all different depending on how it goes. But basically what happens is each team gets 5, each team, everybody on the team basically picks one of the champions that they're going to play. And if you played any of these kind of games before, the champions all have different powers. So some guys are better at attacking. Some guys are better at defense. Some guys are casting spells and, knocking down the opponent's spells and things like that. It's all a little bit different depending on which guys you're using right now. But so far, am I getting the gist of this right? And, kind of take it from there and move it on from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually got my job at Elite because I won the biggest DraftKings tournament at the time for DraftKings, and I knew I had to enter it because it was the biggest DraftKings tournament they had, and it was something like 1/10 of the prize pools that you're seeing now on DraftKings.
Yeah,
which is crazy. At the time, I won a tournament called the Juggernaut, and that tournament paid me like $4,500. And I sent that screenshot to Tommy G, and I said, "Give me a freaking job, man." Like, so that's literally what happened. And then Rob ended up contacting me. So that's kind of how I got how I got here, I guess. But essentially, to talk a little bit about League of Legends, you got it right. It's 5v5. There's 3 lanes, and essentially you have your base versus your opponent's base, blue side, red side, and the champions fight each other, back and forth. They gain gold throughout the game, which lets them buy items. They get power spikes throughout the game as they assemble those items, and then they go into these large team fights to obtain objectives around the map. It's the same map every time. The difference is that in League of Legends, you have one map. It's called Summoner's Rift. That is your only map. So every time they go on the Summoner's Rift with their champions, whatever champion they use, whatever happens, they are always playing the same map, and that map has 3 lanes. So with those 5 players, you have a person in the top lane, a person in the mid lane, 2 players in the bottom lane, and a jungler. And a jungler goes all around the map, slaying minions all around the map in the jungle, and that's where that jungler earns their role. So the jungler's role is basically to set up different team fights around the map.
Yep.
And from there, as the players start to exit what they call the laning phase, because you go in a lane, you collect the gold, you fight your opponent in the lane, it goes back and forth. Maybe you get a kill, maybe you lose. And then from there, you have like a team fight phase. And that was when you start fighting for objectives in the map, the dragon, the baron. That gives you different buffs. And then from there, you just start messing up each other's bases, and first one to win wins. And, kill the nexus and you win.
Yeah, so let me kind of break that down for everybody, because I pretty much understood everything that Moose was saying there. So I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at all this, but let me kind of break it down for you. I think the easy way to say this is basically the idea of the game is kind of capture the flag, right? So your nexus is the flag for either team. You're protecting yours, the other team's protecting
Exactly, yeah, you're defending it.
Yeah, and then in each one of these lanes, there are different things that you have to bypass in order to get there. There's turrets, which are basically towers that, attack you, that you have to knock down, in order to move on and get further past that lane. And the idea is if you can get to the end of that lane, you fight through the opponents on the other team. You fight through the towers that are there as well. There are things like you mentioned that you could stop at the dragons and the barons along the way, and they give you power boosts and things like that. So everybody starts the game out as basically 0 level. And during the game, as you start killing people, as you start doing all this, you start getting, your power, your levels start moving up. So when we're talking about scoring for DraftKings, these are a lot of the things that are the scoring. So the game basically ends when one team takes the other team's nexus.
Yes.
But there's a lot of ways that you can score along the way. Like, obviously, anytime you get a kill, you're going to score. If you assist somebody who gets a kill, you score. If you get killed, you actually get a negative score there. When you knock down a turret, or you kill a dragon, things along those lines are also going to give you bonuses, as well as things like first blood and, getting over 10 kills in a game. So when you're kind of breaking this down for fantasy, how do you take all those different ways we just talked about to get points and kind of put it into some kind of model, or at least some kind of way that you could think about it, where you can start building lineups off of, all this information that we're talking about here?
Yeah, perfect. So I'll talk a little bit about the roles that each player plays. And Moose is back. So I'll talk a little bit more about the roles. But essentially, you got it right. So DraftKings' old format in League of Legends, they had it so that you had to select essentially your 5 players, and then they had 2 flex spots. So you could put anybody in the flex spot, and you could put a team spot. And the team spot is like the team itself gets points for like how many turrets you take down and how many barons you take down, and if you score to win or whatnot. And so that was the old method. And then now the new method is they took away the 2 flex spots, and they just added a captain spot.
Right.
So that's about it. Essentially, what it results in is a little bit more variance in the games,
Mhm.
but you have, basically you have champions in the game that players play called carries, and then you have champions in the game that players play called support players, right? So
Mhm.
like in the mid lane and in the bottom lane, you have your two carries, your mid lane carry and your attack damage carry, AD carry. And then your top lane is sometimes a carry, sometimes a tank. And then from there, you basically want to support those three players in succeeding and carrying your team in team fights. And so your goal essentially when you're building these lineups is to focus on teams and to focus on putting the carries in the captain position if you can.
Okay. So that's what I was going to kind of get to next is the question. When we're, now they have the captain position in there as well. Which are the guys that you should be concentrating on spending your money on? Is it, the top lane guys, or is it the AD carry guys? Like where do the, I don't want to say the winning lineup because obviously it could be different in any match
Yeah.
on a team, but typically where do you think you should be spending your money to put together the best lineups?
For captain spot, you always want to go with, if you can, with a mid or AD carry.
Okay.
And then, if those don't fit by salary, or if you have to make a different choice, or if you want to be contrarian, you could pick like a jungle or a top, and in the captain spot. But basically, that results in you fading. You basically expecting the carries not to do as big of work as like a really powerful top laner or like a jungler. But usually, you want to go with the mid or the AD carry.
Okay, then even when you're picking the players, when you're picking the players you want in the team, when you're building lineups for DraftKings, when we play football, we want the quarterback and we want to link him together with one of his wide receivers and one of his running backs, or guys that are going to catch passes from him, because the correlation of having those guys together is how you wind up building some of the better, higher winning GPP lineups. How much does correlation matter in, League of Legends when you're building those lineups? Do you want a whole bunch of guys from the same team, or does it get to a point where they're kind of stealing kills from each other and you probably shouldn't be, concentrating too much on one team?
Well, you always want the winning players. So that is always true. Unlike football, where like Julio Jones will lose every game but go off for 30 points, you always want the winning players. So you just have to make a decision on who you think is going to win the game. So
Right.
if you have a 5-game slate or a 4-game slate, the first thing that I do is I sit down and take a look and say, okay, which team do I think is going to win, and which team should I focus my stacks around? And
Okay.
you're right. Essentially, when you're making a lineup, you want to include the team that you think is going to win, and you want to pair it usually with another team you think is going to win, and then from there you want to focus on depending on how you do your lineup construction or what the salaries allow you. You want to basically focus on a few different things. So, for example, if you're putting in the AD carry slot in your captain slot, so let's say you think the AD carry is going to do well. You say, okay, I think that this AD carry from Team Liquid is going to do really well. So then, if the AD carry is going to do well in the bottom lane, right next to him is his support player. So you should probably link them together, because if that AD carry is going to get kills, that support is going to get assists. Right. And that's kind of how it goes. Obviously, you can be a little bit contrarian. You can fade the AD carry. Maybe the support accidentally gets a kill or something. But the goal is for the support not to get kills. It's to get the AD carry fed so that the AD carry can carry the game. But if you're just going with simple lineup construction, if you're putting in an AD carry, you want to pair him with the support. If you're putting in a mid laner, you want to kind of pair him with the jungler, because when the mid laner is fighting in the mid lane, the jungler is moving all around the map. So oftentimes the jungler will make his way through the mid lane and set up for a team fight.
Yeah, because he can go from the top line to the line at the bottom as well. So he's going to be all over there and kind of help him out. So there's some good little, little tidbits for you, at least as a start here. Now, we're going to have Moose coming on the opening line. Since we're down to only a few sports we can talk about here, we're going to have Moose coming in on the opening line a couple more times throughout the year here. And we'll dig a little deeper into some of the stuff for you. But I did want to mention to you guys, if you want to start playing right now, pretty much every night, right? Almost every night now.
Almost every night.
Yeah, almost every night at 2 or 3 in the morning, we're seeing League of Legends stuff popping up for the next day at DraftKings. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. It must be the coronavirus. But we're gonna have Moose on and kind of dig a little bit more into this. But for today, we just kind of wanted to give you guys the basics, kind of give you guys a rundown of who Moose is and what his background is. As you guys can tell, he's obviously not only passionate but very knowledgeable about this stuff. So we're going to pick his brain over the course of the next couple of weeks and hopefully make all you guys really good esports players, or at the very least esports gamblers right now. So Moose, tell everybody where they can follow you over on Twitter, and then we'll sign us off here.
Awesome. Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm Moose Elite. So, I'm directly related to Elite Wins. It's even in my name. So there you go. If you guys want to find my articles on the Elite Sports Betting website, it's all on elitesportsbetting.com, and you'll be able to find the esports button. And I am now going to have daily articles posted for bets and DraftKings slates. So any slate that I play, I'll let you guys know about. And essentially that's going to happen every night because we have League of Legends China, League of Legends Korea, League of Legends North America, and League of Legends Europe. That's a lot of League of Legends. It's a lot to cover, but once you kind of get a feel for it, it's manageable. And that's kind of where I'll have everything posted up. And I'll always link it when I post something. I'll link it on Moose Elite, and you guys will be able to check that out and follow me and read about the players that I think will succeed on the slate.
Yeah, so again, make sure you guys are following Elite Wins over at Twitter there. You'll see whenever Moose has an article and it pops up. You'll also see anytime he puts in a bet pass. If you guys are following the Elite Alerts Twitter account, anytime he puts a bet in the bet pass, or any of us put a bet in any of the sports, it gets updated and it shoots it out on Twitter so you guys can go over there. And then also we'll have the League of Legends stuff for DraftKings as well. So you'll be able to play some daily fantasy for those of you who've kind of been jonesing for it. So Moose, my man, I want to thank you for hopping on for me. Like I said, we're going to get you back on again probably later this week, a couple times next week too. So we got a lot of esports stuff to talk about, which is good because there's not a lot of other things to talk about. Yeah. So for Moose, this is Benny signing off for another episode of The Opening Line at EliteSportsBetting.com.